Welcome back for the fourth and final season of Beyond the Venue podcast. When I started this project almost 4 years ago, I had absolutely no idea that I would be the one navigating beyond the venue by returning to the classroom. Before diving into my second year as a doctoral student, I figured it was a great time to wrap up this podcast by offering my listeners a variety of perspectives and experiences of life in academia. This semester, you'll be hearing from my friends, colleagues, classmates, and more, all of whom I've had the pleasure of working with since my return to Temple University a few years ago. Let's hear from them now. I am joined today by three outstanding human beings whom I had the pleasure of enjoying every Wednesday night with during this past spring semester. I've got young Janine and Drew. We were all in learning to read together with a super fun professor, Sabina Neugebauer. I had classes previously with Drew and Young, but had the pleasure of getting to meet Janine for the first time. So since it was only the four of us in class together, I thought it'd be super fun to get the squad back together. And they all have just very different perspectives, different stories. And so I wanted to give them the chance to share all that with the audience today. So I was the lone educational psychologist, and all three of you are, was it literacy and learning? Is that correct? That's your concentration?
That's it.
Yeah. Literacy and learning. I finally got it. Not linguistics, as I screwed up on the talking points notes beforehand. So I'm just going to ask each of you to share with our audience the backstory. You know, how did you end up at Temple College of Education? What made you decide that this literacy PhD program was the right fit for you? Janine, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay, thank you. So looking way back when I was in my undergrad, I actually was working toward a degree in advertising. So I wasn't even interested in education when I started college. And I had an internship at a local advertising agency, which was amazing. The people there were really positive and they were excited to teach me. I think the biggest thing, though, I learned was I really wasn't interested in advertising. So I had to look back on my education and figure out where my passion really was. And it fell onto this class that I had taken, which was called Minding Our Business. And in that class, I worked with urban students to help them develop a business that they eventually presented to a board of directors who provided them funding. And then they went through the process of actually hosting their business on a sale day. And it was in that class that I realized my passion was really working with students, not necessarily the business piece of it. So I ended up getting my degree in advertising. I graduated my 4-year degree in business, and I went to a 2-year certification program at Westchester University for my teaching certification. And again, going with my passions, I've always loved to read, I've always loved to write. So I decided English would be the best place for me to land. So I ended up getting my master's in English from Westchester University while I also was teaching. And I'm going into my 20th year now as teacher, same school district where I started. I teach middle school, 8th grade English language arts. And I specifically at the time went into my master's in English because I had no real educational background in what I was certified in. So I wanted to make sure that I was really educated and specialized in English. So that's why I chose my master's in English, which then eventually kind of guided me to think about more of a specific English focused PhD program. So when I was started to look into getting my doctorate, a lot of the programs, specifically programs geared toward working teachers, were these kind of EDD programs in educational leadership. And I knew that I didn't want to go into administration. That really wasn't my path. I knew that I wanted to go work with pre-service teachers. I'd been a mentor teacher. I had hosted a few student teachers. So I really enjoyed working with teachers who are kind of going through the process of learning how to teach and their personal instructional methods and what worked for them as they were kind of working with students. And so I ended up deciding on Temple's PhD in education, specifically with the concentration in literacy and learners, because it was English focused. And again, I wanted that very specific English focused background to really kind of specialize and hone my degree and my knowledge so that I could kind of bring those tools specifically to the table in my own classroom as well.
Great, thank you. And one of the terms you used, pre-service teacher, that was a new term for me coming into the academy, as we call it in higher education. So those are folks who are in school to learn how to be a teacher. Correct.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
That is a pre-service teacher. Excellent. Thank you, Janine.
Sure.
Young, let us know your backstory.
Yeah. So I'm from South Korea, and I studied all the life, all of my life in South Korea before I came here. So before I go to high school, so I my dream was to be a doctor, like especially a surgeon, because I enjoyed watching medical drama in Korea. So I was really obsessed with that drama, and I want to be the doctor in emergency room, right? So some cool, fancy doctor was my dream, but the problem was that math was too difficult for me to be a doctor, surgeon. So I found some other way to be a professional job, and I decided to major education, and language art was the most tempting option because I like talking and reading something. So, and also my high school friends also told me that you really teach well whenever I ask some um, uh, questions in the classroom. So I'm they said that I'm always satisfied with your explanation. So I felt that I felt I want to be a Korean language teacher. So I went to the education. I went to major education, especially in Korean language arts. And in junior, I took the class of reading instruction and pedagogy. And the class was learning about the concept of reading or reader and instruction that works. So, and the final report in the class was doing some small research that I'm interested in. So I analyzed Korean language art textbook with my friends, and I felt really interested during the research. So I felt I want to continue to study reading education and research, and decided to go to the master's degree course. And during the course, my advisor recommended me to study abroad because she got a doctorate degree in the United States. She might be she I remember that she got a literacy culture. I I didn't remember the exact major name, but literacy and language and culture. So she got a that degree in the University of Iowa, so she recommended to study in the United States. And honestly, first I didn't think about the studying abroad since my major was Korean language arts, and I was mainly interested in teaching first language. So I wondered what major should I choose, like first language or English or second language. It was really um, difficult to choose. And I found that literacy can be one of the answers of my curiosity because it's literacy um, is about using language, whatever the language is. It could be a first language or a second language or English or Korean or other language. Um, So I came here. Yeah.
How did you
Yeah.
find out about Temple and the literacy program? Was it recommended by an advisor or someone you knew in school in Korea, or did you just Google it? You're like, yeah, Philly sounds cool. I think I'll bop on over there.
Actually, it's all of them. I just
Yes.
it was like a strategy that I asked my friends or advisors or some folks in my education field, and they recommended some good schools. And but the critical thing was that I was interested in reading motivation of middle school to high school, from elementary to high school students. So my thesis was about that, and I looked through the articles that I cited, and Sabina is one of the most interesting researcher
Oh,
among the
interesting.
least.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I applied to Temple. That was the
And she's
professor.
your faculty advisor, correct?
Right.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy you're here. We're happy you came back too.
Yeah.
Well,
I
we'll
just
hear
came back.
all about your summer in Korea coming up shortly.
Mhm.
All right, Drew, what's your backstory?
Well, I am going. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll start at the end of my undergraduate uh, period of time. So when I left my undergraduate studies in teacher education, I was hired as a teacher. I always felt like I wanted to go to a program that was similar to what Young was describing a little bit. Like I was really passionate about education, culture, society, really interested in like politics and education. I know Columbia has some programs that would be more like sociology and education, and these are kind of the spaces where I feel like I really would be. So, but I ended up like Janine at Temple because it was a PhD program. There was flexibility in when you could take courses, and that was really appealing to me because something I really always struggled with is this idea of leaving the classroom to study the classroom in some way. So, like, I am a teacher, so it would be like, I feel like if you're doing a doctoral program, so you like leave the classroom to then say, oh, like I'm going to talk about education, this space that I actually was in and then left. Right. So, um, I really was trying to find a program where I could remain in the classroom as a teacher. And so I wanted it to fit my like the role I was in my district because there is some assistance or aid or tuition reimbursement you can get from a district if it's aligned to your career, like your the role you have in the school district. So that's why I ended up in this literacy space. Um, and one of the things I really enjoyed about this specific space is literacy is very broad. So I think a lot of times when people hear literacy, they think reading, writing, but there is really this broader understanding of literacy as meaning making. And I think when we lean into that, there's ways of really thinking about, what is the role that literacy plays, both maybe traditional understandings like reading or writing, but also these more contemporary understandings of literacy as meaning making. I think it's really consequential to think about how does literacy play a role in preserving democracy? How does literacy play a role in people understanding themselves, but also understanding others? And I think one of the things that we are really conflicted with right now in the world is this struggle, inability to explore the experiences, perspectives, stories, and voices of those who are like us and those who are not like us. Rudine Sims Bishop, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop would call that, the mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I really think when we actually boil all of these things down, all of these major issues that are happening, um, I think literacy is actually the path that gets us to where we need to go. And what I mean by that is a lot of literacy is storytelling and meaning making. And when we are able to listen to the stories of others, we're able to understand, we're able to empathize, and hopefully we're able to move forward in a more just and uh, move forward in a more just way to a more liberated and transformed space. So I would say these are kind of the ideas that led me to Temple. The one other kind of tidbit I threw out there, I actually taught in central Pennsylvania in a district that was really limiting curriculum that was committed to what I just described. But when I kind of put that on under the umbrella of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or I put it under the umbrella of like teaching as a way of social justice. So that was really being limited, and at a time when anything that was disliked in society, people were kind of putting it in this umbrella of critical race theory, and it was really being used as a way to weaponize what was being discussed. Um, it led me to a space where I thought, if I'm looking for a space of academic freedom, where we're able to have hard conversations and explore complicated and difficult texts in order to pursue a better world and a better future, maybe I'm going to have to go to the college level to do this. Like maybe this isn't going to be something that's going to be the space won't be created to do this. Maybe in our public school systems, and I am now in a place where I feel like we're really committed to this work. Institutionally, there are other barriers, but these are kind of all of these pieces together that I feel like has brought me to Temple in the PhD program for literacy and learners.
Excellent. Yeah, that's I have, it's only been, a year plus for me for coursework, but I feel like in every class, I feel like a lot of us are coming with that same kind of like social justice mind frame where I feel like there's a lot of like vulnerability and information sharing that I don't know if that would necessarily take place at like other colleges. And it's been great to feel um like like a brave space, to be able to have like some of those hard conversations. Because I always loved like hearing about what you and Janine were like, doing in the classroom and how you're making changes with your own students. So that kind of leads me right into my next question. So Janine and Drew, both of you are full-time teachers, both in middle school or both in middle school. And so how do you manage? So Young and I are both full-time PhD students. So we do 3 courses per semester, in addition to whether it's like a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship that pays our stipend and our health benefits, etc. So Drew and Janine, full-time teachers who attend Temple on a part-time basis. How do you manage that? I know that you both have pretty intense commutes, families, pets, etc. How do you manage your time? Janine, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say my family has been the biggest support system and probably the only reason that I can really navigate all of the different scheduling between work and then leaving sometimes from work, driving the hour into Philly to then go to class all night. Um, and I joke it's a lot about early mornings and lots of coffee, but I do on the weekends get up early and I try to get a lot of work done before it's kind of go time for my family and all of their activities. And I really thought it would be harder than it was. I initially went into this idea thinking, maybe I'll just do 1 class a semester. And Sabina is also my faculty advisor, and she kind of was talking me through the idea of maybe taking 2. And I thought I'll try it, and it worked out really well. I just kind of balanced my time, and I have work due on this day. And so, in my planner, I would make sure that I was doing a little bit each day to try to get through. And again, my family has been very supportive. My kids are really excited to kind of see me go through this process. My husband all the time is making sure that everything's kind of taken care of so that I can dedicate more time to school. So it's really their support and their help that's kind of helped me figure out this space to fit this new piece into, our lives.
Great. Drew, what about you?
So I also have a lengthy commute to school. So where I work is actually about an hour and 20 minutes away from where I live. And then Temple's probably about an hour and 30, 40 minutes from about where I live. So I would say the biggest thing I feel like I'm able to do as a part-time student is I'm able to spread coursework out. So, I am only taking maybe one or two classes a semester. Um, so I think part of finding the balance, and something that Janine is bringing up, that something that I don't have children yet, so I have pets but no children, and so that really allows for time, like to be able to work on some of these um, activities or assignments or readings over the weekend. But there's also, I feel, a lot that we're doing that can be applied to what's happening in the classroom. And so I think that really makes it meaningful. So I think if you almost see it as like an extension of, as opposed to something entirely separate, I think that creates a lot of space where it's manageable.
What do you, the two of you, what do you typically listen to in the car? Are you podcast folks, or are we listen to music? What's your car time?
I think I catch up on phone calls in the
Hmm.
car, especially when I have to go from school to school. I call my kids, we touch base for the day. How was your day? What kind of homework do you have? Until I then see them later that night. But even touching base with friends, when I'm not doing that, I'm listening to music, just trying to, get a minute of decompression time. You go all day as a teacher talking all day long. It's constant communication, it's constant dialogue back and forth. Um, and then you get to class, especially when it's a class of just four people, and so there's this whole other element of, okay, we're having some conversation, and I love it, and it's really engaging. It put me into a place where I can really rethink and restructure kind of the things that I'm practicing at school. But that hour in between, it's just nice to kind of zone out and decompress sometimes a little bit too. So mostly it's just kind of very peppy, upbeat music that I can kind of just sit and sing along to while I'm driving.
Drew, what
So
about you?
I would say I am something, actually, as you asked that question and as Janine was chatting, something that I did do that also saved time. I did start uploading some of the articles that are assigned reading to uh, like applications that turn it into an audio, or
Brilliant.
it'll read it back. So
Hmm.
that has been a time saver as well with the commute. But I'm a big podcast listener. Um, I I also am. I'll listen to audiobooks.
Hmm.
So those are like the two things that I spend some time doing. I try to take the first maybe 30 minutes or so when I'm driving in to just catch up on news that's going on. But otherwise, it's definitely podcasts or audiobooks.
Yeah. I love that idea of taking an article and listening to it, because I know I feel like I probably brought this up a lot in class, of some of these articles are just dense and very, very difficult to get through. And so I feel like if I were able to hear the audio version, like would sometimes my listening comprehension is significantly better than my reading comprehension. And so I do wonder, like, would and I think that even that was even a subject. It was a topic of discussion one of the weeks in class, where I think was it they were looking at, like, students were saying that they thought they retained a lot more information when they listen to an audio version of something versus being tested after reading it, but they're like, no, that's not correct at all. Here we have the proof that, like, which, that's not everybody has excellent listening comprehension skills, because you have to listen to all of it. You can't just, kind of zone out and jump back in. Or I know sometimes, like, when you're reading, it's, forget who, this might have been from the OC, where she said she's reading and she puts a dot, like, when she finishes the page, to, like, make sure that I'm, like, fully, like, getting what I'm seeing on the page. Um so yeah, I think I do. You find that you retain the information well from listening to the articles in your car, Drew? Like,
So it depends. I think when
yes.
they are some of those denser articles, um, it it's more difficult to wrap your mind around. Where
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes if I already have like a framework to understand the context of what's being written, like that's much more accessible to me, and like the audio version of it works great. But something you were saying there that just I think some important to note is this idea of just like when you're thinking of the classroom practice and you're thinking about what's happening in the academy, um, like just really the importance. I think like a moment of like reflection in the academy really should be even like the just accessibility of this work. Like if this work is to be transformational, if this work is to fundamentally shift the way systems and structures and people act, interact, and show up in the world, then why? What is the purpose of making it so dense? Um, and I think I know Bell Hooks talks a lot about that. Like who is this work for
Hmm.
really? And does the answer to that question drive the way we try to structure and formulate some of this work?
Yeah. Go ahead. All right, so we're going to jump on over to Young. Young, I'd love for you to share, what has this past year been like for you? Because you just showed up to Philly for the first time last August. So new to Temple, new to Philly, new to the US. What was this last year been like for you? And then, let us know about your summer in Korea. And, I'm sure it was very difficult to come back. Again, very glad you did. So yeah, what has this last year been like for you?
Yeah, last year was just a chaos. Yeah, it's just, oh my god, and it's just chaotic. And as you said, I've never been lived in other countries before coming to the Philly, and my major is about the first language education, which is Korean, and I even didn't think about living in other countries and studying in other countries. So, and the one thing was that the environment was totally different from my thoughts. I mean, when I saw the university in the United States, it was like which I've seen in drama. It was usually a big space, big field, big green field, and football and peaceful area. But I came to the real urban university in big city, so it's really not silent and really chaotic. So totally different and new spaces to me. And yeah, also I think the academic scholastic style is different from Korea in the United States. Like I remember that the most difficult part was that I had to say something with my agency in the United States. Like in South Korea, studying is more close to acquiring prior knowledge and learning from my professor. We even call them advisor. We usually have to call them as a professor because it is about their dignity or um, something. So I think there is a in Korea is kind of belief that creative and better thoughts could be made from the former wisdom and knowledge. So acquiring, learning them is really important. So studying was more close to the process of big acquiring and making something based on that. But after I came here and attending a class, um, I felt that the progress of talking about something in the class. So when I was in Korea, slogan was like think more and talk less. But it was totally opposite in here, and I think many folks felt that good idea develops through the talk in the States. So
So in Korea, it was
um,
more of like that lecture format of like, I'm going to
mhm,
talk at you and you're
mhm,
going to consume this information that I'm giving you versus the
yeah,
structure of a lot of our classes has been um, a group conversation.
e-
So
exactly.
that must
Thank you. Yeah.
was that very so the first class that you and I had together in the fall was the longest name ever, Philosophical Foundations of Educational Research with Tim FC. That was 100% just the 12 of us talking. Like he'd give very broad questions. Was that um overwhelming, intimidating, scary? Um I mean it was for me at first until I'm like that was a lot of like shared vulnerability that I think helped kind of like prepare me for everything else that was to come.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
is that kind of what you experienced that first semester?
But I also wanted to say that supportive environment helped me to overcome these problems. Like so when I say something, my folks and friends in class agreed and give some feedbacks to my opinion, regardless of my English speaking ability, that was really supportive. And it was really my first year experience was really overwhelming, but your support was really helpful to me. So yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a two big thing, problems and support. That was a two words that can explain my first year in Philly, in academy. Yeah.
That was also a class where we learned what the academy was
Hmm,
and
hmm.
how higher education is referred to as the academy. Yeah, and it really helped to be constantly reminded of like you belong here, and that kind of like there's no wrong answers. We're all learning together. Um, Great, and tell us about your summer in Korea.
It was amazing. Yeah. I mean, Korea is developing now. I mean, it's really changing in a good way. So I went the trip with my family during the last week of my vacation, and I went to Jongno. It's really a cultural place in Seoul. So and there is a really famous street. Its name is Seosunla Street, and they have a really good beer place and taco place. It was really surprising that why is taco is really famous in really traditional street. So, and I think it's there is one famous TV program in Korea. It's Living Alone. It's in Korea. In Korean, it's 나 혼자 산다. But and it introduced the taco place in TV programs, so I think it's really famous. But I couldn't try the taco because there was too long line in front of the store. But I tried beer. It was amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we
Mhm.
also have plenty of beer and tacos here in Philadelphia, so I'm happy to make some recommendations for you. The lines will
Oh,
not be as long.
Mhm.
So I'm going to move on to my next question. So, we're all getting PhDs, so that dissertation is looming. I personally have no idea what my dissertation topic is going to be. I'm just all over the map, and interested in everything. So, for Young and I, as full time PhD students, we have 2 years of coursework, and then we'll take what are referred to as the comps, so like your composition exams, which are different for every concentration. Once you finish that, then you write a proposal for your dissertation, and your committee helps you work through that, ultimately taking about 2 years to work on your dissertation. So, um, uh, Drew and Janine, where are you at with how many courses you have left to go? Like, do you have kind of like a timeline of when you think you're going to be done with your coursework? And then on top of that, do you have any idea what your dissertation topic is going to be, or are you still all over the map like myself?
So I am taking, so I've 7 courses left before like coursework is finished. And for me, I feel like I do have a dissertation topic that I'm going to be exploring, and it's really this idea of I'm intrigued how teachers value, interpret, and implement culturally responsive and sustaining educational practices and frameworks. And this, like, I'd say secondary piece that, well, it was a secondary piece that I actually think is kind of moving forward to this more prominent space is, what role sacredness plays in that. And I use the word sacredness, but I define that as like basically like an inherent value, worth, and purpose of individuals, communities, the world that we share, and what role does that play in classroom practices, specifically related to literacy classroom practices. So I think that for me, that's, I think of that as when I ask that question, I'm basically wondering, what are the ways in which curricularly we're making sure that we have inclusive learning environments, but I feel like the inclusivity piece actually falls under this idea of like this sacredness umbrella. And where I use that word with intentionality is because I think if we like live up to that and try to uphold that, it doesn't allow us an opportunity to opt out certain stories. Because if we say they're sacred, then we're saying that they have inherent value. And whether we agree with them or not is a different story. But if we say this is someone's experience and perspective and it's sacred, it kind of leans us into this conversation. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about exploring in the dissertation when the time comes.
And who's your faculty advisor that you're currently working with?
Dr. Brooks, so Wanda Brooks.
I had her for quality.
She's awesome.
Big fan.
She's awesome.
Janine, what about you?
Well, I have about 2 years more of coursework until I can really start getting into my dissertation. And like you, MG, I don't exactly have an idea of specifically what I want to get into. I started initially going into this program thinking just about student motivation. I know I talked to Young about this a little bit. And what motivates people to be interested in things or to do the work. Um, but more and more, I've started to really think about the digital space. I know in the class that we all had together, we listened to a podcast, and in it, there was some conversation about digital reading and print reading, and that concept has continued to come up since then. Just in my own career, we've started to implement this digital literacy piece. Um, and so I really feel like that might be a space that I want to explore a little bit more. Still getting into it, still trying to figure it out, but that's really something that's kind of captured my interest. And, I want to see where it goes in terms of my instruction. Like Drew was saying before, when you're in the classroom and you're taking these classes, there's this ability to start to think about the theory behind the practice and applying the concepts that we're talking about in class with what's happening in my classroom. And so that's really kind of what I've tried to do. And I'm hoping that that will help to inform my decisions about my dissertation moving forward.
Great, thank you. So the last question, I wanted to ask, like, do you have an end goal? Like we talked about, in the beginning, like your backstory and like what led you to here. And so, for me personally, like I'm higher ed all the way. So I think one of the things that kind of broke my brain with this learning to read class was that I did appreciate that she separated it into like two chunks. It was it code making and then meaning making. And so this kind of first half of the semester where we're talking about phonemes and phonics and parsing syllables, and this it was interesting because as someone who is doesn't have kids, doesn't plan on working with kids, I just felt very much out of my element, but it was also wonderful to have not only such an enthusiastic professor, but to like learn from the three of y'all with your experiences and your knowledge bases. But I love how Drew always goes back to the meaning making. And so once we got to the meaning making, especially with the reading motivation, I was like, okay, now now I'm starting to get this. So for me, like my end goals, I'm happy to be a professor, just teach and do research, but I always say if I can find the one thing that makes me money, that I can just go and be a consultant and just get paid to do something, that totally works for me. So just like my dissertation, I am totally open to where this program is going to take me. Young, what about you? Do you have a specific end goal in mind, or specific dissertation topics that you're toying around with? Are you as an a nebulous as I am?
Yeah. I'm basically interested in how to engage and motivate school age student in reading context. So um, after first year, I'm trying to go more deep about this topic, and like recently, I think I'm interested in what teachers do to engage and motivate their students, and their implementation works for what types of students, because each approach and instruction could be effective in each different group. So I want to go more and investigate uh, how to how to engage them and how to respond uh, and for students. So that I think that could be a topic dissertation topic, but I'm not sure because that's really always I'm basically always interested in all topics about student and teachers. So and reading and writing. So eventually and finally, I want to be a researcher um, wherever I work. I'm more interested in work at the institution or nonprofit organization because I have a belief that the importance of this community or institution will is really big and will be bigger in the future, because I think research cannot be done alone. So I think community and some gathering and um, synthesizing the power, each person's power is really important in research area, and I think education is more important in that aspect. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I'm a big believer in the importance of community, and especially not only as a student in this program, but also when it comes to research. So I'm right there with you. All right, Janine, what about you? end goals?
Yeah, so I knew early on in my career that I eventually wanted to teach at the college level. I've always had a passion for, like I said, teaching pre-service teachers. I knew when I was taking my methods classes that there was something to this ability to reach students and make changes in an English language arts classroom, which is it's really all about kind of communication and what Drew was saying and these stories that people have and learning from them and just becoming better as a community through that. And I feel like my reach, my connection with the world, will extend farther as I move into a place where I can work with future teachers and how they will interact with their students. So my goal right now is to use my K through 12 experience to, you know, apply those skills that I've learned, the experiences that I've had, to those future experiences to help teachers kind of move forth in their career. So eventually, yeah, I'd like to work in higher ed at the college level, pre-service teachers going through that student teaching experience, those methods classes. That's really where I think my passion and my heart is.
Great. And Drew, what about you?
So I all over the map. Like sometimes I think I'm gonna stay in the classroom because I think that's where like real meaningful change can happen. Sometimes I think of I wouldn't want to be an administrator as far as like a principal is concerned, but if I could get into curricular spaces, I would enjoy that work. I'm extremely interested in being a professor, whether that's adjunct or a full-time professor. That's something that's of interest to me. Just as for what Janine was saying, this idea of being able to show pre-service teachers like other ways of being, as opposed to maybe what we've experienced. I think that's powerful. And then sometimes like I'm really interested about if I could be in like a State Department of Education or like in some of that political work as far as policy and education work would also be something I'd be really interested in. So all over the map, but all of those things sound good to me.
Open for adventures.
That's right.
Where is this journey going to take us? So, okay. So for my super duper final question, we're bringing it back. So the name of the podcast is Beyond the Venue. This was, I never know how much folks at Temple in the academy, if you will, know about my background. But prior to coming to the College of Ed, owned a business called MG, the Venue Specialist, and then pandemic hit, and we weren't doing events anymore. So, started this podcast Beyond the Venue, interviewing folks from around the hospitality world, anyone who had to get creative and navigate beyond the venue due to the pandemic. So, the last question I would always ask my guests is, what's your favorite venue? So, this can be anywhere in the world, whatever holds a special place in your heart. So, Young, what is your favorite venue?
I love the cafe around the Washington Square Park in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Its name is Thank You, Thank You. It's Thank You, Thank You.
Oh, that's a cute
And
name.
yeah, it has a great fresh brewed iced coffee and filter coffee. Because whenever I go to any cafe, I cannot find fresh brewed coffee. They only sell iced coffee for cold brew coffee, but I do not like. I know that it could be some argumental, but I don't like cold brew coffee. Yeah. I like fresh brewed coffee with with ice cube. So grabbing a cup of coffee, and walking through the Washington Square Park is one of my favorite chores.
Great. Yeah, I used to, one of my first jobs out of college was right around there. So we did not have that coffee shop at the time. That's great. Janine, what about you?
Would say my favorite place would have to be the beach. For familiarity, definitely Wildwood Crest. The beaches are really long. So when you get out to the water, it kind of feels like this separate place that really doesn't have much impact from the hustle and bustle of the people on the island. Specifically, it would need to be late afternoon, evening, as people have kind of started to get off the beach, so it's not as crowded. There's still some sun, there's a nice breeze, the waves are, doing their thing, and bring me a pizza for dinner while I'm sitting there relaxing, and it is the absolute perfect place for me to spend my time.
Lovely. And Drew, what about you?
So I have many, but I would say a safe bet for me is a bookstore.
Oh, okay.
Yep, a bookstore is always a special place for me.
Is there anyone in particular or just any bookstore?
You know what? I love Aaron's books in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. Um, that would definitely be a favorite of mine. There's a couple bookstores that I love. I think it's Main Point Books in Wayne, that I think is fantastic. So, but any like bookstore like that, I would say largely an independent bookstore, that's in a small town. They're my favorite, some of my favorite places. I find them sacred.
Bringing it full circle. Well, I am over the moon that the three of y'all were able to join me today, getting that Learning to Read squad back together. I'll certainly hope to see you around campus this fall, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode from the fourth and final season of Beyond the Venue podcast. New episodes of this final season will drop on Fridays throughout the fall semester. Follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram for details and updates about each episode, and stream all 4 seasons on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks so much for your support.